Governor, do you want
Oh,
this open to
Queen.
the general public? Because it looks like there are some extra visitors in the back that walk.
That's fine.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the people are the ones that have created this place, and they should have control and vision on things. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I would like to, if you agree with what is said, I'd like that you raise your hand, and if not, you can just leave your hand lowered. Do we think, as justices or any voting procedure, oops. Okay. Where was I? Oh, for justices and their voting procedures, who believes that they should be public votes? Is in any vote that the DOJ or justices vote on, the voting and the name should be made public.
And we do that by way of signatures on any document. If anybody that votes in the affirmative, their signature is attached to it.
That's not true.
Okay, and
Things that are shot down or barely pass. Like,
well, that would depend. I would say anything that is
No way, they're
voted yay or
lying
nay.
straight.
Like most things that pass a bill or something like that, generally you will have a number, an account, and you could or should, in my opinion, be able to see who has voted for what, if it's of significance, of course. For instance,
Oh, sorry.
sure, go ahead.
I was going to ask, because there's something that Nino and I have been doing in that regard, but I think it would be, it would make sense to me if, I think it'd be a beneficial change if, rather than having all the signatures be on a singular host of legislation, if they could be separately added to ensure that there's not any sort of question as to whether someone has actually signed on, you know, with all changes considered, and or whether it's just sort of passive acceptance.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, I assume if it's signed with their name, it's an agreement. It's they have said
Right.
yes to it,
right.
right?
There's not been any issues of that I'm aware of, at least, of somebody's signature being applied to something where they didn't actually agree to it.
Sure. I think that still arises from the who
McNee,
voted
raise
no
your
things.
voice!
It would be good. For instance, if we want to stem out corruption, if it was to ever occur in the future, if people were being paid money under the table and they were voting no, how would we ever know who was doing what without requesting a FOIA or something like that? And it seems ridiculous considering it's a public voted process anyway.
If it's something for legislation, I completely agree where that's something that's public facing. I think there are some things that we as justices vote on that's more internal run things that maybe don't necessarily need to be
of
public.
course.
Like, for
yes.
example, the director of the marshal's position. If there's certain people that vote no against a particular candidate, that could severely affect their working relationship with that individual on an ongoing basis should that information be made public.
Who cares?
That that could sway a justice from potentially not expressing their full opinion or voting no in fear of the way that would affect their relationship with that particular
That's how it
candidate.
works in the United
Whereas
States.
by keeping that type of internal vote private, that allows the justices to more freely express their actual opinion without fear of retribution or affecting personal relationships.
I'm curious.
I would personally disagree because I feel like we're all professionals and we can try our best to look past any high school drama in that matter. And but hey, I could be mistaken looking at LSPD.
The mayor's having to publicly disclose their internal discussions and communications about who they choose for chief of police or sheriff.
So, think about it like this. From my perspective,
We
at
do
least
that
for the
already.
director role. I'm curious. Do you not see a conflict in a way in which you can control the department that can control you, so to speak? Do you not see the conflict there in itself?
I don't think the department controls us. Any citizen and any law enforcement officer, whether the BCSO, LSPD, or even just any individual citizen, can bring forward an authority conduct review or an impeachment to hold us accountable. It does not have to be the marshals. The marshals are the law enforcement arm of the Department of Justice, just like Los Santos County has the LSPD and Blaine County has the BCSO. The Department of Justice has the marshals to effectuate its law enforcement mandates and demands. But any citizen, any law enforcement agency, not just the marshals, can hold us accountable by way of impeachment and authority conduct review. That is why that was designed.
Totally understand that, but an impeachment is completely different to the point I'm making. They can do anything in terms of laws, investigations, and other things on you, just like anybody else could. But if you're in power over them, that creates a conflict. How can they investigate people that have power over them properly?
Is that not inherently the same with the mayor's office, sir? They also pick their own sheriffs and chief of police.
I do understand the point in a way, but I believe, well, at least in my opinion, it should be a separate entity. And I get that
I'm gonna kill this guy afterwards.
Well, actually, what do you mean by what you said in terms of it causing turmoil, essentially?
Well, I think that so. One thing I'd like to point out is,
bro, I'm gonna. This is
directly as the director of
tailspin lies.
The process as it was intended to work has worked. Barrett has filed an impeachment against me without fear of retribution, despite the fact that I am his boss and could fire him at any moment. Now, I'm not saying it should stay that way. I'm not saying the justices should be able to remain in a position where they are the director of this department. I agree that there needs to be a level of separation, whereby the justice appoint a director, but once that director is appointed, they are in a bit more of an autonomous role, and that they don't answer to the justices on a day-to-day operational level in any way, shape, or form. I'm completely in agreement with that separation. But even without that separation, the process of allowing for an impeachment has worked. There is no undue influence that the justices would have over the department to prevent them from holding us accountable. The fact that we're having this meeting right here is proof that the system works, even with us in a direct position of power.
How many different votes and people were put forward for the director role in the last 4 or 5 months?
Before, well, it only got put forward once the legislation changed to allow it to not be a justice. As soon as that was put forward, which was on the 20th of February, I put forward 2 candidates. I put forward first Dark, and then secondly Barrett. For different reasons, neither of those managed to get a unanimous approval. So the state has no issues with individuals voting in both elections for both mayors. If I may, at that point, and maybe I'm crazy here, and the mayors can tell me if I'm completely off base. Is the 2-county system working?
Oh, that's
I agree with Weiss on this one. And we've talked about this before. The 2-county system.
Wait, what?
And that's why I did some hesitation towards the electoral reform. What ended up being the reason that I signed on to it was because the original change to have it be each person can only vote in 1 election may have been done maliciously. And so just in the sake of for the sake of restoring justice, it made sense to return it to two separate elections. But in that same regard, the ability of people to vote in both elections is going to ensure that the population of Los Santos is always going to outweigh the population of Blaine County in any sort of legislative vote. And that's
I want people to talk.
Going to mean that
you want them to put the stuff out and then you say no.
Blaine County is always going to be kind of subject to the whim of Los Santos County unless there's some drastic infrastructural changes.
I'm curious, if you were in Blaine County as the mayor right now and you were to draft legislation that said
fresh banana autism
something along
out.
the lines of hey, you vote on a mayor election involving our county, you can only vote from our county. What would be stopping you from doing this?
There's no way to effectuate that.
Sorry.
People would have to decide on their residency in one county or the other.
Right.
Whether or not it's either dependent on property ownership,
That
in which
is
case
not correct, though. So you, as a mayor, can pass through legislation based on your county with no opposition. Is that not how it works? Unless it's based on a legal standing in which the DOJ can oppose it. Is that not what we discussed last time, Mr. Chavez?
I believe we began that topic, and then I think we got sidetracked.
Okay, well, let me just read the Constitution very quickly. Blaine County shall have legislative authority over its jurisdiction. Okay, do we understand what this means?
Absolutely.
The legislative authority. That means they have authority on their legislation. And if they are to pass legislation that is based on their authority alone, then you cannot oppose it. It is put in, and then you only can draft something afterwards to oppose it, just like case law works for the DOJ.
I believe what Princess is saying is that by allowing people to vote in both elections, the majority of the population being in Los Santos.
I understand that. You're missing what I'm saying. She can pass a law that says the county can only vote in their own county. That's
the reason we want Koil.
You're in.
There's
worked it out yourself.
That's it ends up being the issue more than anything. It has nothing to do with.
We want Koil to hear this.
The issue with the two-county system is that Blaine County does not have the infrastructure to support itself, so we are always going to be subject to the whims of Los Santos County.
Let him feel our
whether
pressure.
Or not the elections are separate. We
and the pain.
We always are going to have to.
This is strategy.
Try our best.
If I speak,
I guess appease Los Santos County. And luckily we have, Nino is very, supportive of Blaine County. And so it's been doable. But depending on the mayoral choices for both counties, it's still, we are in the Guam situation. Blaine County cannot support itself without financial help from the DOJ or Los Santos County, because we do not have sources of income.
What do you mean by that? So there wasn't a case that came out. So for example, we can wake up tomorrow and a new crime could be being committed, right? And it's not technically illegal because the crime hasn't been defined yet, and there couldn't be a case about it unless it were to be made illegal.
Right.
Which is why the justices have the ability to modify the penal code at will and add a new charge.
They don't have the authority to change that at will at all. You have the legal authority over judicial matters and legal matters, and they are when something arises in which law is discussed, generally in a courtroom.
Can I just ask, is the DOJ a legislative authority? Are they a legislative body?
Yes, the legislative authority of the judicial and legal matters within the city, and that is generally when law is to be discussed. In saying that, I'm curious.
They're actively lying to the governor. It's actually insane.
In which, there would be a law that's broken that wouldn't need it. I don't know what you mean by. Can you give me an example of what you mean by having something passed, or why you would need something passed without the law going through the correct process, being discussed, so to speak?
If you want to take a look at this, Governor, it's report number 18480. It maintains a change log of the penal code.
You said it's a report?
I believe so.
Everyone publicly, so if you look at shared reports, it should be there.
Oh, sure. 1 second.
Murray, where's the modify penal code line at?
Judicial powers, I think.
Well, what document did you say that was, Mr. Capslock?
18480. I still don't know what the caps lock document is, Zaddy.
I think this is slightly news to us. I don't think that was ever written in.
This is a completely new concept.
Well, I'm not sure what is written where, but I mean, like I said, the Constitution says that you have judicial matters as authority, and that's where it should pass through. And this would not be a judicial matter, in my opinion, until it has gone through some sort of process or formally posted on the website, the government website, like every other legislative change.
Yes.
You understand an issue like this is you say this sort of would need to be pushed through for X, Y reason, but it's just what if the people vote against it, right? What if you become a dictator and pass a law that says, fuck you, you're all in jail for the rest of your life?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'd get impeached.
Well, you
And
wouldn't,
I'd
because
have to
they'd be in
talk
jail
the-
for
I'd
the
have to
rest of
talk
their
the
life.
other justices into it, right? You'd have to have the entire justice pool turn into a coup, which is
Right.
the reason why there's not just one of us. There's 4 or 5 of us, ideally.
Weiss, the underlining point that's made there with the dictator thing is we already have cases where these things came into play without any. I didn't see this. Mumbles didn't see it, or was it Pred? I don't remember. And Mumbles. All these charges came into play. There was no. We were not aware they were coming in. We didn't know the details of it. These things just overnight became illegal. Now, that's not to say that Class 3 firearms shouldn't be illegal, but there was legal things that became illegal, and it staunched any public discourse over it or public say. And that's kind of the underlining nature of
Well, that was it was done in the mass.
When
right?
you look
And
at
then
all
they
these
got
new
overturned.
charges, which of these couldn't be referenced to a law or case that has already happened? I believe almost everything could have been. I don't understand why it would need to be passed like this. For instance, battery of a police officer. I'm sure our police officers had their head caved in once or twice, so something could be referenced in which why this is determined. All this could, in my opinion, have been done the same way through a case law. I don't understand why it would be done like this.
Yeah.
Well, a case would have to be brought, and we don't choose which cases get brought to court, right? So, let's
Okay,
take something
so
different, like criminal possession of a classified document. When somebody got found with a classified FIB document that was not inherently illegal, we obviously, given the sensitive nature of that document and what you told us about how dangerous that could be, determined that possessing those classified documents was illegal. But that's not a case that was brought before us that we could have done that as a result of a case. We just had to do it. You know what I mean? Like there's no, if nobody appeals a case, there's no charge to charge anybody with. How would that ever see a courtroom?
Somebody
so we just
had
have the mayors
a
do it?
what, an FIB document? You said.
Yes, a classified FIB document.
So how did anybody come across this FIB document exactly?
Was believed to be, well, not believe, it was caught as a contraband item after a bank robbery. I forget what exactly.
So it was involved in a crime.
Correct, but that crime didn't go to a courtroom, right? The individual got charged in the cell, they pled guilty, they go up to jail. The DOJ never gets involved, never sees a courtroom. There's no case to derive a case law out of.
So how exactly did it get put on your table? I'm curious.
The police brought it forward to us and said, "Hey, we found classified illegal." The classified
so it is
FIB
based on a
documents,
judicial matter to an extent. Yes.
And you should be able
well,
to write
we made the
legislation
law.
behind it. You should be able to write legislation behind it, like I did with the Penal Code, unauthorized transaction of medical equipment.
I think if you were to reference that law, just because it's still a judicial matter, the entire judicial process starts once somebody's in custody, from my understanding. So that would still be a part of the judicial process, since you oversee all of that. So I don't see why you still couldn't reference that if you were to say, hey, we found this document inside XYZ, and this is why we're classing it as a legal document, and reference the Constitution, which, security, safety. Obviously, we wouldn't want FIB documents out there. I think you could make a pretty easy document that says, hey, this is based on case law or a judicial matter.
What now? That's for making a new charge or something illegal that isn't illegal now. What about simply something like updating the times and fines related to a charge? Is that within our authority and purview to determine the
if you pass that as legislation, it should be within your authority. There's nothing stopping you from tomorrow writing up a piece of legislation that says we can change times and fines based on XYZ. But if you're to change your time and fine, unless it's authorized by the state, I don't believe it should be done, as it is technically still a piece of legislation.
That's
in saying that, you can still reference crimes that have happened. For instance, if there is millions of bank robberies, and you have the logic of, hey, we're going to increase the times for this because there's too many bank robberies, you can reference the cases and put that forward and say, this is why these are changing.
We did.
But here's what's missing here. Here's what's missing here. What I'm claiming that is, because we were part of that conversation, right? Like the other mayors and whatnot, we reviewed this. is that this particular line, when we put it in, and to keep it simple so this wasn't long running, is that this line was intended and meant to mean you are the mechanism. In other words, you physically open up the MDT, you insert in, the wording, you change the numbers, etc., etc. You are the authority to do it. But it didn't infer that it would be without legislative backing. And the reason I highlight that specifically is, that's...
Which part of this are we referencing right now? Exactly.
Under justice authority.
Yes.
Oh, yes, my bad.
Bullet
Go ahead,
point
sorry.
modification of the penal code.
Yeah. So if I am to believe that the intent of this the entire time was that at will the penal code could be modified without any discussion, without legislation, etc., that is not only news to us, it's counter to all the comments and discussions on the document, but also the meetings surrounding this.
I mean, during that meeting where this was discussed, I do specifically remember the point was brought up of we wake up one day and there is a new crime that is being committed that is not covered
an
by
emergency,
the penal code, and the justices had the authority to at will create a charge to cover such crime. And
as a mechanism.
The language
was this. So this legislation was signed by, passed by everybody, the mayors as well.
That is
signed
correct.
by the justices. Yep. It was reviewed by the mayors before it was posted for public contest, and it did pass the public contest phase.
Yeah, I mean specifically, like to get some guidance on this penal code change log, and I think the nature of this is like all these charges were modified with fine and time, with mostly input from law enforcement, from my understanding. However, if we find that these the monetary fines associated with this are just not it, they're a detriment to society, you're saying we would pass legislation to get it reverted, or would we?
You could
just come talk to us. So just come talk to us. Which ones are there?
I want to hear from the governor, because we,
you can pass anything through the state as a review as well. Any legislation can be reviewed. It doesn't need to be.
I'm going to kill this guy
afterwards. It doesn't need to go through the legislative process to counter a legislation. If there is something that you believe is against the Constitution and you have the signatures to do so, you can pass it through the state.
That was abused. So, it's.
I mean, also there wasn't just law enforcement there. There were clerks, there were members of the public. It was based on the audit document originally that was provided by a member of your cabinet. Like that was what started.
Are we saying legislation was changed, or what are we saying
that's not
right now?
true.
The penal code. Yeah, but all of it was based on the penal code audit that was
Archibald's document is completely different from this.
Okay, listen. How about this? Like I said, just
this guy is actually retarded. I don't know.
There's a few things we need
is
to touch
he acting in bad faith, or is there? Is this guy cooked?
Like, so if
this guy is not it.
Write it up, send it over to me, and I'll have it looked at through the week and see what comes from it. Today, I guess I'll get back to you.
I'm shell shocked. How much?
That was wonderful. Thank you for your time, sir.
No problem.
This guy is willing to straight lie to the governor for his semblance of power. It is actually insane.
I guess before state review, if there's specific things within the penal code that you feel are overkill or need changing or whatever, let's just talk it through and figure out if we can get it fixed, because it seems pretty simple unless it's something crazy.
Yes, there's a lot that we got to talk about.
Thank you, Governor.
So I'm just going to ask you kind of flatly, was it your impression? What was your impression of that line in the penal code? I know we've discussed it a lot of times, but what is your current position of the reading of it?
With regard to what the ability, I mean, we just talked that through. Is the intent was that essentially when it comes to state law and
I'm going to blow up this
illegal,
building after you
items
leave.
Being contraband from particular robberies, etc., that be able to be updated. Also, things like the times and
this
fines.
is a joke.
Crane way back in the day took what the penal code was and took it to like 1/10 of what it was previously across the board.